So a couple of weeks ago, our Temple of Muna Solidarity trip was coming to a close. And after 3.5 days of pretty much just flat out engaging in the intensity of the experience, we arrived at Ben Gurion Airport, and I had prepared, actually my guide, Ezra Cortman, had prepared for a little VIP treatment. And so a man met us at the bus, a young man, and he guided us right through the airport very quickly, zipping past all of the lines to our own special line where we didn't have to wait. And we got right up to passport control. A woman took all of our passports and she put them on the side. And then other people, she waved up. Yes, you, come up. And she took this group and that group. We waited. First it was like a minute or two. And then like 3 minutes and 5 minutes. Our VIP super duper hero started getting annoyed and started arguing with the passport control. And there ensued a little disagreement and Israeli-styled conflict. Finally, after 20 minutes, they finally took us. There were a few other fashlas along the way, which is a Hebrew Arabic word for saying big messes. But in the end, we got in, and we were a little bit annoyed. But when I looked at our airport VIP guide, he looked very calm. He had even like a little bit of a smile on his face. Kind of leaned into him, and he kind of leaned over to me, and he said, "You know what? Last week, I was in Gaza." And that just said it all. He was in a kind of hell last week. And so all of this airport ridiculousness really wasn't that important. When you see what's really going on in the world, little things fade in comparison. As all of us know, right now we are going through a time of incredible pain for Israelis, for Jews, I'd say for everyone in the world. And of course, it's clear that the Palestinian people, those in Gaza most especially, are suffering in a profound way from Hamas's deliberate plan, which has pretty much played out as they intended. When we visited Israel, we could see the trauma on the faces of the Israelis with whom we spoke. We could hear what they were coping with. And now, at least for me this past week, I can see even more clearly what the Palestinians are suffering from famine, from hunger. And it seems that Israel and the Palestinian civilian population, who are unable to stop their Hamas oppressors, and the Hamas oppressors win by having their own people suffer and die. Learning of the tragic deaths of the 7 volunteers from the World Central Kitchen, which the Israel Defense Forces claimed responsibility for and apologized for, really brought into sharp focus what is happening. To me and to much of this world, this, I think, has become a moment of inflection, where the scope of this humanitarian crisis and Israel's inability to help these people, to protect them, is clear. And at the same time, we should realize that Israel has not been able to bring home its hostages, as we pray for every single day, morning and evening in shul. Since October 7th, I've been sitting with many members of our community and people beyond who are coping with their own traumas, with their own struggles. They have families in Israel who are suffering, for whom they are concerned. I've sat with people here in our community who have kids in schools that are really not able to hold on to the complexity, to the nuances of this situation. I've also sat with people who are struggling in their work environments where the only narratives that are lifted up are the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian narratives in a very black and white way. And if you don't support that narrative, then you can be marginalized or worse. One of these conversations, which drifted out into the sense of hopelessness of this war, not to mention how it ripples out into so many other disparate areas of hopelessness, and sadly, there are many to choose from. I was asked in this conversation, where do you find hope? At first, my brain went into problem-solving mode. Well, I would find hope if the hostages were freed, if this happened and that happened, and we could do that. But that really wasn't the question. Where do you find hope? It's not in problem-solving, but it's looking for inspiration. Now, today is Shabbat HaHodesh. As Rabbi Kling-Perkins introduced it, the fourth of these four special Shabbatot leading into Pesach, coming just before Rosh Chodesh that Allison so beautifully just announced, which means Pesach is only 2 weeks away. Always a moment where I feel great hope. I mean stress. I mean hope. The special maftir contains the words, HaHodesh hazeh hu lachem Rosh Chodashim. This month of Nisan, which is the birth of the Jewish people, which would contain Pesach, is for you the beginning of the months. It means lachem in the rabbinic conception that it's for you, that you are responsible now for the timekeeping. The Midrash says the following, that the ministering angel said to God, Master of infinity, when do you declare the festivals? And God said to them, you and I will now accept whatever Israel decides the festivals shall begin. The Holy One said to Israel, in the past, these holy days were my purview, and they were in my hands. But from now on, they are in your hands. The decision of when a new moon begins, and thus when a festival occurs, is from human beings who look for the new moon, declare it before a Beit Din, a court, and then decide. It's now human beings' responsibility, God is saying to us. And just as there's humans being responsible for time and for the calendar, it's also a reminder that we have to be responsible for this world, that God is waiting for us to act. So where do I find hope? I look for people. As Fred Rogers taught, look for the helpers. Where do I find hope? I found hope when we met Adir Schwartz in Jerusalem, who created a massive NGO to help those on October 7th and beyond. When we heard from the director of the ER at Hadassah Medical Hospital in Jerusalem, Dr. Ahmad Nama, a Palestinian Israeli, speak about how all different faiths and backgrounds in his hospital come together, even at times caring for a terrorist and the victim of that terrorist in the bays next to each other. That kind of care and compassion, I found hope. When I look at how our community has rallied together for the last 6 months in so many ways, I find hope. When I think of Jose Andres, the founder of the World Central Kitchen, and their volunteers, I find hope. As he wrote in the New York Times this week about his organization, from day one we have fed Israelis as well as Palestinians. Across Israel, we have served more than 1.75 million hot meals. We have fed families displaced by Hezbollah rockets in the north. We have fed grieving families from the south. We've delivered meals to the hospitals where hostages were reunited with their families. We have consistently called repeatedly and passionately for the release of all the hostages. And he continues, all the while we have communicated extensively with Israeli military and civilian officials. And at the same time, we've worked closely with the community leaders in Gaza, as well as Arab nations in the region. There's no way to bring a ship full of food to Gaza without doing so. That's how we served more than 43 million meals in Gaza, preparing hot food in 68 community kitchens where Palestinians are feeding Palestinians. And so when he demands change in the situation, he has a lot of bona fides or bona fides. I find hope in his mission. And when I think of our young VIP attaché on that Thursday evening, his selfless service in Gaza, his just wanting to make a living the following week, I find hope. When I sat with a Christian colleague this week over lunch, who's a local minister, and we talked about the war and trying to hold on to the experiences of both Israelis and Gazans, of Jews here in our community, I found hope. When I listened to the words of Yocheved Lifshitz, I found hope. I don't know how many of you have heard Yocheved's unbelievable story, which was on the podcast The Daily a week ago. She's an 85-year-old woman. 85 years old, taken hostage by Hamas terrorists at kibbutz Nir Oz, a kibbutz that was particularly devastated with a quarter of its population either murdered or kidnapped. Her husband, Odeid, 83 years old, was shot in the hand. She didn't see him. She didn't find out until after she was released in that exchange of prisoners 2 months later that he was taken hostage and didn't die. She, in this wide-ranging and powerful story and interview of her life, she exudes a kind of optimism and strength that is just unbelievable. When she was asked in the interview, do you still believe in peace, the peace that you worked for, the peace that you and your husband strove for, where your husband would take Gazans to Israeli hospitals for medical care? And then this total betrayal. She said, yes, I believe in peace. After the hell she endured, and knowing that her husband is still enduring it in Gaza, she still holds on to a different vision of tomorrow. A different vision, a vision of peace. And that's where I find some hope. One of my favorite Hasidic commentaries, the Netivot Shalom, a modern Hasidic commentary, Shlomo Noach Berezovsky, a Hasidic Rebbe, offers a really insightful reading on this morning's Parsha. The text right at the beginning says, Zeh davar asher tziva Adonai. It's talking about this Mishkan, this space, this portable sanctuary the Israelites were going to live in for 40 years in the wilderness and worship in. And it says, Zeh hadavar. And so the question is, what is exactly this thing that you're commanded to do? And he points out that there's two actions with the Mishkan, because they kept moving it. Every time you stopped, you had to build it up. And then every time you left, you'd have to take it down. But this is only one word. And he says that means that there's building up and taking down in every single moment. He writes, quote, bitterness and joy function as one. They function like two lovers who are never parted. Thus we experience an inner crush that is for the sake of light and goodness, but also a bitterness that comes from the realm of building, saying, I will build an altar from my broken heart. That's it. Even amidst the tears, we can find hope. When we are struggling, when we are in pain, we can find hope. Sometimes for me, I like to pause and look up. I don't know what it is about looking up, but I feel like there's some kind of hope. Maybe it's like the psalmist who said, Esayanai Eloharim, from where does my help come from? I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Maybe it's like looking for the sun after all the rain and snow, looking up for a spiritual power that lies far beyond and deep within us. When I've been reciting the HaHodesh these days, I've been thinking about the second to last line, the penultimate line. And when I say that line, I've been looking up to the heavens. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. May a great peace come down from the skies, from the heavens. May that peace, that help, that hope come down from above and inspire us all, just like the helpers, to do what we can to build and rebuild this world. May we all find that hope. And let us say, Amen.